Good afternoon. 4 o'clock, Sunday, the 24th of January 2021, and we're 33 years in 31 days looking at 2013. Who have we got in here this afternoon? Jenny, Ruth, good afternoon, welcome along. 14 other people across the other platforms, Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. We're going live to 3 locations at the same time. But welcome along. 2013 is the year that we're going to look at for my policing career as we cover my whole service as I approach retirement next month. So we're going to look at 2013. So 2013 starts with a bit of a sad note, because you'll know that yesterday spoke about having a half an hour phone call that was completely unexpected with Paul McKeever, the national chairman of the Police Federation, when I needed help and advice and guidance before I went on and was interviewed by BBC Radio 4. And he was a very big personality within the Police Federation. He was very much a very highly regarded and much loved chap. But sadly, he died. I think he died the end of 2012, I think. But his memorial service was in February. And it just turned out that I think, if I remember correctly, I think the memorial was on a Saturday. And it was at the cathedral in London, just across from Tower Bridge. I'm not big on London. The Borough Market and all that. There's a cathedral there. Southwark. Is it Southwark? Southwark Cathedral? Maybe. Somebody will tell me if I'm wrong, I'm sure. But it was there. So I travelled down by train on the Friday. Much like my trip to London previously, I met up with Veep, Princess of VP, who was also coming to the memorial the following day as well. But we met up, we had a walk around the city and did a few different things, had some dinner, and to a really nice restaurant, actually. Really enjoyed dinner that evening with Veep. And then the following day, we went to the memorial. Interestingly, that morning, prior to the service, there's a little Cafe Nero just around the corner, and a certain lady who was starting to make some big waves on social media had asked to meet up and say hello. And that lady was Irene Curtis. Irene Curtis was the president of the Superintendents Association, and she was Barracks Lass on Twitter. What a lovely, lovely lady. Really enthusiastic about the use of social media, really supportive of the stuff that I was doing. This is one of the things that I was pointing out yesterday, in the contradiction between some of the messages that I was getting at home in my own force, but then other people from other forces who were openly and happily telling me that they thought I was wonderful and I was doing the right thing, and wasn't it great? But very supportive of everything that I was doing on social, and she became a really good advocate for the police on social media. The Superintendents Association sort of drifted into the woodwork again, if you like, with regard to social media, but they had a real presence and a real voice while Irene was at the helm. But met up with her, went to the memorial service. Now, the memorial service, I sat with Veep and I sat with Mike Pannett, and we sat and listened to the service and those that spoke. And then there was a reception in a sort of place next door. And it's one of those things. What I'm going to do is take you back to when I was a tiny little boy. Grew up in Manchester, and I'd gone into the city centre with my dad, and we were crossing over Cross Street, I think it's called. Oh, I'm not sure though now. It's that long since I've been away from the city of Manchester. I think it's Cross Street, but it runs along the side of the town hall in Manchester, and we were crossing over that street. And as we crossed over, there was a chap coming the other way. And my dad said, "Hello," and carried on walking. And then I'm pretty sure in the middle of the road, he sort of took 2 more steps and stopped and turned around and looked at this fellow and said, "Sorry, do I know you?" And the fellow stopped and turned around and looked at him and said, "Yeah, well, I'm John Thor. In the Sweeney and stuff." "Oh, yeah, nice to see you. Bye." Bizarrest sort of experience ever. But it's one of those things where you sort of, I think for my dad, it was the fact that you see somebody all the time on your TV screen and doing stuff. And then when you come across them in real life, it almost feels as though you know them. Now, unlike Twitter where you can build a relationship and all the rest of it, but you can fall into that trap of letting on to them, thinking, because you think, "Oh, I recognise them and I know who they are," and they haven't the first foggiest who you are. And so what happened to me when we came through and went into the main sort of reception thing, met people in there for the first time. Katie Magnet, if people know her, met her for the first time in there at that reception. We stood chatting, said hello to a few senior officers that were there that I knew, and what have you. But as I was walking, Nick Knowles actually was there, I think. Certainly the guy that played PC Stamp in The Bill, he's very pro-police. He was there. Had a chat with him. Nice fella. Shook his hand. Lovely fella. But there was a point where at one point I was walking along this corridor and there's this chap coming the other way. And I went, "Hi, hello." And he just sort of looked at me and went, "Oh, hello," and carried on walking. And I stopped and thought, I know who that is, but why did I say hello to him like that, as though he's somebody that we know one another? Because he won't have the first clue I was. And he was all over the news at the time, and it was Keith Vaz, the MP from Leicester. And I was like, weird. You do those things, don't you? Anyway, headed back, if I remember correctly, I think I actually headed home after that, headed back towards Cheshire after that service, and went on to a night shift. I think I was doing a short night shift, but I went on to a night shift. I seem to remember driving straight back up the motorway and pulling in the gates at Middlewich, which is a bit weird. But the interesting thing really with all that was the fact that that was the weekend of my birthday. And I can always remember my wife saying to me, so let me get this right. Let me get this right, she said. It's your birthday weekend. You've gone down to London, walked around London and had dinner with another woman, and then come home. Yeah. Fortunately, she trusts me, so that's good. But yes, that was an odd weekend, sort of partially celebrating my birthday, I suppose, but also the memorial for Paul, which there were a lot of people at, Clive Chamberlain and the likes and so on, and all the big wigs or the big knobs from the Federation, that many of which have gone now, which is no bad thing. Anyway. Back to work, still on social media, still identified by the force, but still anonymous as far as everybody else is concerned. It was starting to get a little bit embarrassing. But we deal with it. Stayed, anonymous, just occasionally where people go, oh, we'll have to turn the camera this way, or we'll have to, do we know who you are? And it started to look a little bit childish on occasions, but stuck with it. Anyway, you'll recall from yesterday that during 2012, I was told in no uncertain terms that although I'd done nothing wrong, there would be absolutely no tweeting from the desk whilst I was at work. Slowly but surely, over a period of time, with my phone just sat next to me on the desk all the time, and for text messages or calls if there's a problem at home or anything like that. But you start looking at social media, you think, I can look, but I can't do anything, because the minute I do something, they'll pounce and tell me that I'm doing something I shouldn't. But then things would come along and they say, oh, there's been police officers been seriously injured in wherever, and you think, oh, I'll retweet that because nobody's ever going to criticise me for that, or retweet something by the Federation because nobody will ever criticise me for that. It's actually sort of police stuff, and so it was a lot less, but slowly but surely tweets started to creep back in. And I turned in for a shift one day, and there was an email from the inspector, and it said, thank you for this, and well done with that, and would you have a look at that? And I'm not sure what you did there. Can you tell me what happened with that? And a few other bits and pieces. And then right at the end, it said, and stop tweeting from the desk in big capital letters. That was it. That was the end of my tweeting from the desk. I thought, that's it. I've been told once, it's crept back in. I know it's crept back in. I thought it was being tolerated in my head, but it clearly wasn't. I thought, now I've been told a second time, I'm going to get in trouble. This has got to stop. And so I'd been doing a thing that we called tweets from the desk. It was like a hashtag tweet from the desk. And so I thought, that's it. It's got to stop. I never decided to do this to get myself into trouble, to jeopardize my career and all that kind of stuff. It was all about sharing stories and experiences and shining a light on some of the stuff that goes on at custody. So it stopped. So what did I do? Well, I thought, well, I'm going to have to write a blog about this. So I wrote a blog. I'll share it out later. I'll go and find it. But it was called Reduced Service. Basically, it went through all the reasons why I was tweeting from the desk. It went through all the reasons why nobody was at risk while I was tweeting from the desk. Example, if my colleagues are down one of the wings and they're having a scrap with a prisoner and need my assistance, am I going to finish my tweet before I go and run and help them? Or am I going to leap over the desk and go and help them? I'm going to leap over the desk and go and help them. Sod the tweet. But there was a worry about it, and social media frightened some of the senior officers to death. They didn't know what to do with it. And so, it frightened them. So I wrote this blog, Reduced Service, that basically said, I'm going to have to stop. You'll get tweets when I'm off duty. You'll get tweets on my break, but you'll get nothing else. And there's going to be reduced service. And what I started doing was that it was also a mental thing for me to make me do something. As I walked through the doors going into the custody suite on my shift, I would put a tweet out that said, just arrived at the custody suite, radio silent, hashtag radio silence. Because I'm saying to people, I cannot tweet, I will be off the air. There's a lot of people that were quite disappointed about it and said so. Even some senior officers from around the country who said it's quite evident that you care about what you do and such, and it's a shame, and it's a misguided decision and but I thought, that's that. So every shift in I go, radio silence, in. Phone still by the side of me at the charge desk. Just don't interact with social media while I'm there. Then one day, Excuse me. One day, I didn't sleep very well last night. So one day, I'm sat there and my phone pings, ping. And I look down at it and it's a direct message. Private direct message. Who from? Chesh Depp, the Deputy Chief Constable of the Constabulary. Looked at it and I thought, I'm going to have to read it. So I opened up Twitter, had a look. Neil, I've read your blog. Very interesting. I think we should talk. I couldn't reply to it because I thought, this is an integrity test from the Deputy Chief Constable. I'm getting an integrity test. And if I do something with this now, they're going to nail me. Send me a direct message and then I reply to it from the desk and they know I'm on duty. They'll go, right, he's on duty, he's at the charge desk, and yep, he's just replied to the Dep. Got him. Thought it was an integrity test. So I waited until lunchtime. I spent some time thinking about it and thought, why would they go to that extent for an integrity test? Secondly, if I was in the mire and she really wanted to sort of tear a strip off me for this blog, well, then she'd have gone down the formal route. She wouldn't have come to me via Twitter. She'd have gone down the formal route, and somebody for professional standards would have come to see me, I'm sure. So at lunchtime, I sent her a reply back that was sort of along the lines of, nice to hear from you. The fact that you're sending me a DM fills me with a sense of anticipation, but also a sense of dread. She came back to me more or less straight away and said, absolutely nothing to worry about. I've read your blog. I'm interested in it. I'd like to discuss it with you. Can we arrange a meeting? Yes, boss. Said meeting was arranged. I was exchanging messages with her the other day, actually, because she was also, her name, Helen King. She went on to the Metropolitan Police as Assistant Commissioner, and then she retired, and she's now the Principal of St Anne's College at Oxford. Lovely woman, very professional police officer, did a lot of stuff in Cheshire. But we traded messages the other day, and she said she can still remember me coming in to her office for coffee, looking a little bit pale and rather nervous. Going to the ACPO office, or the MPCT as they are now, going to that office is not generally something that you want to do. Better away from those places more than there. But I went and I turned up and she invited me in. She says, come on in, Neil, come on in, sit down. Got coffee, we got coffee and what have you, and we sat chatting. And she talked to me about social media and what I was doing, and I chatted about some of my thoughts, and we talked about the blog and all the rest of it. And when I walked out and came out of headquarters, I had to ring my wife straight away. And I rang her up and I said, you're not going to believe this. She said, what? I said, I've had this meeting with the Deputy Chief Constable. Oh yeah, how did that go? I've come out with a job. What? Helen King basically took on board what I was saying about social. One of the big things that I'd put in the blog was the fact that I'd been to corporate communications for that day, told them all sorts of things they were really interested and excited about. 12 months later, they'd done bugger all with it, nothing. We're wasting our time. They're not doing it right, and it could be so much better. And Helen King basically said, I've read your blog, I see what you're saying, put your money where your mouth is and show me. So she put me on a 3-month secondment, loosely seconded to corporate comms, but essentially getting out and about around the force, teaching officers and PCSOs and showing them what social media was about, how they could use it, getting them moving with it, get the accounts going, and see what we could do. It worked. It worked. Cheshire Police account had amassed something like, I can't remember the figures now. I did have them written down somewhere. They might even be on one of my old presentations somewhere. But they'd had that account for years and years and years and years and years, and amassed something like 9,000 followers over years. And in the space of 3 months, I jumped it to like say it was 9,000 followers. I jumped it to 24,000 in 3 months. It soared. One of the first experiences that I had was I went out with the PCSO at Crewe, went out on foot patrol, walking around, and I said, we're talking about social, and did she know what it was about, and da-da-da, and she said, oh, yeah, we've got the account, but I don't really use it, and I'm not really that interested in it, and I don't do Twitter myself, so I'm fine, I said, well, where are we going? And she said, oh, we're going to see somebody on such a street because they've had some graffiti sprayed on the side of the house. I said, no, that's not right, is it? And she said, no, she said, it looks sort of Polish. She said, but it's popping up all over the place. I said, all right. She said, there's some on the phone box here. And we walked up the phone box and she showed me. So I took a photograph and said, we can use that and put that on social. What? So I explained what we could do. We took a photograph and said, put it out on Crewe's account and said, this is popping up all over the place. Does anybody know anything about it? Or give us a call if you know what it means or what it's about, or what if you've been affected by it yourself, that kind of stuff. Can we do that with Twitter? Whoa. By the time we got back to Crewe police station, having been to this house and then had a walk around and done what PCSOs do, which is like stopping for coffee at the old folks' home and then wandering to a shop and say hello to the staff and then cleared back to the Nick. There was somebody with a piece of paper and said, somebody been on the phone about graffiti. It started. The social media boom was starting in Cheshire Police. In the early days there, it was very much plate spinning. I could go to Crewe and get the plate spinning, but then I'd spend a day at Runcorn and then I'd go over to Warrington and then I'd be at Northwich, and then I'd look and go, Crewe's gone quiet. I have to go back and get them going again. So it was very much, you needed a shove and a push all the time to be doing it. But it started to develop interest. And we had a huge follower surge. I took on the Force account as well myself. So I was running the Force Twitter account. I was running the Force Facebook account. One of the things that used to always come up, particularly on Facebook, occasionally on Twitter, but especially on Facebook, would be loads and loads and loads of comments of people all talking to one another and asking questions, and nothing got answered. And those that asked a question would often get a reply from somebody else saying, don't expect a reply from Cheshire Police. They never reply to you. So I turned that on its head. I started replying to everything, put loads of engagement in. Again, the page likes and follows for Cheshire Police went through the roof. Really, really grew very quickly in those first few months, and then continued to grow. But that was that. I started replying, and that engagement really started to drive the accounts up. I put a very quite a long but informal report through to Helen King at the end of the secondment saying, this is what I've done, this is where it's gone, this is what we've achieved, these are some of the barriers that we're still coming up against. A lot of cops still didn't trust it. They were still waiting to say, I get everything right and it's all fine and dandy, but I make one mistake and they'll chop me off at the knees, and they would, because that's what it was like. That changed over time and is much better now. More about, you made a mistake, we all make mistakes, don't worry about it, let's learn from it, sorry, move on. But at the time, make a mistake, oh no, take your legs, boom. But that was it. I did 3 months, and then I went straight back to custody. I had another meeting with Helen just to discuss my report and everything that I'd written down. She was very pleased with everything that I'd done, but there wasn't anything else for me to do just at that time. So I went back to custody. The superintendent in charge of custody at that point was also very, very unsure about social media. I'd said many, many things about social and how it could be used and what we could be doing with it, and he was not convinced. And yet, oddly, I've got a photograph on my phone here. I took a screenshot of the tweet because let's just find it. Where is it? In 2016, and I've got a screenshot of the tweet there. In 2016, I have to confess, he wrote, this superintendent, bearing in mind in 2016, I'm in the control room, so I'd left custody at that point. I was no longer a problem to him because I think I was perceived as a problem, I think, by many people. But he was kind enough to write, I have to confess, you were so right about social media, and I was so not so right. You're a great ambassador for it too. I was shouting really loud about what we should be doing with social media and how we could be owning our story and telling our story our way and delivering it to the public how we want it to be seen, not how some newspaper editor wants it to be seen or some radio news program editor wants it to be heard. Put it out our way. That was that 2013. Then back into custody, carried on working in custody for the remainder of that year. But towards the end of the year, there was the inspector came down and said, right, we've got to move some stuff around. We've got to think about how it's going to work. And if you've got less than 2 years service to go, we're leaving you alone. We're not touching you. But if you've got more than that and you've been here for X amount of years, and essentially the whole criteria seemed to me that it had been tailored perfectly to capture me right at the top of the list. I never know to this day, really, and perhaps I should have asked it. I should ask him because I have a good relationship with that superintendent now, and perhaps I should ask him. But I felt that the whole process had been tailored to get me out of custody. They decided they'll have a change, so then they tailored a set of rules to say, how do we catch Neil and get him at the top of the list? Because if I'm not in their department, I'm somebody else's problem, because I was still a problem and I was still a loose cannon and I was still a bit of a rebel and I was still making people very uncomfortable and hot under the collar because I was talking about a lot of stuff going on in policing and talking about it in very plain, common sense, plain English terms that just didn't sit well with people. I don't know to this day whether I was technically booted out or whether it just happened to fall that way, but it felt like I was being booted out. I didn't want to go. I imagined seeing my career out in custody, which would have been 14 years in custody. I look back at that now and I think, oh God, no, how did I ever think that would have been okay? No. But they set the process and said, you can go wherever you like, whichever neighbourhood policing team you want, you can go. And I looked at that with my cynical head on, having been in the cops for far too long, and thought, yeah, I'll tell them where I want to go, and they'll say, well, there's nothing there at the minute, so we'll put you here, miles and miles and miles away, and we'll try and get you there later, which will never happen. So I thought, I've got to find somewhere for me to go. I've got to find somewhere that suits me. So I ummed and ahed and looked and pondered and thought, what could I do, and all this of it. And then I looked at the control room, computers, tech, comms. I've always been good at comms, radios, overseeing big wide area, dynamic, fast-paced decision-making stuff. That might suit me. So reached a point where the inspector came down, and this is all still in 2013, reached a point where the inspector came down towards the end of 2013, and he said, right, we need to, you're obviously going. So he said, we're in the process of sorting everything out. So I need to know where you've decided you want to go. So I said, and which LPU you want? And I looked at him and said, I'm not going to any LPU. And his face just changed, because you could see on his face thinking, suddenly he thought, oh, I've got an argument on my hands now. This is going to be unpleasant and all the rest of it. I said, but I'll tell you where I will go. He said, oh, where's that? I said, I'll go to the control room. Oh, really? Will you? Oh, I can sort that out. Suddenly he changed again. I can sort the control room out. No problem at all. Leave it with me. Thanks very much, Neil. Off he went. So I committed to go to the control room. And just before Christmas, it was confirmed that I would go to the control room in January 2014. January 2014, I would go to the control room. And that morning, when I knew I was going and it was all in place, the two fellow sergeants were still sat around me. And the chair that I always sat in meant that I could sit at my desk, look at the computer, and if I looked that way, I would see straight down A wing with the cells on A wing, directly ahead of me with the cells on B wing, and if I looked over my right shoulder, I could look down C wing and see all the cells down there. I didn't have my back. My back was to the wing that has the interview cells in it. But everything that I could see down all the wings. But I liked that position because I had a real sort of commanding view of everything that was going on in the custody suite. And I sat there in the chair, bearing in mind that I thought I was going to see my career out in custody. I sat there in the chair and I looked down A wing and I looked down B wing and I looked down C wing. I spun round in my chair to face the other two sergeants. I said, you know what, fella? I said, what? I said, I've just realised something. What? I hate this place. Until then, until that point, it had never bothered me. It had never affected me. But as soon as I knew I was going, I saw it with a different pair of eyes. And I thought, I've got to get out. I hate this place. But I'd never seen it, allowed myself to say that. I'd never even crossed my waking mind that I didn't like the place. But yeah, 2014. Alistair, welcome along. Good to see you. So that was that. I suddenly realised that I definitely needed to get out of custody, and that was what I was going to do. And that was the end of 2014. So we move into, 2013. So we move into 2014 tomorrow on day 25, where we'll move into the control room, talk a little bit about that, and some of the things that happened in 2014. I'm getting all my numbers mixed up tonight. So we'll talk about 2014 tomorrow. So thank you for dropping in, replay viewers. If you got this far as well, thank you for watching. Please share it out if you can on Twitter and so on. It always helps to get some more views. And they're a bit long and they're a bit sort of unique. You either love this stuff or you hate it, but it's me also cathartically just sort of offloading all my police stuff ready before I actually finish. Done. So there we go. That's all for today. Take care, folks. Have a very, very lovely evening. Enjoy the rest of the last of the weekend. And I hope to see you tomorrow for day 25, looking at 2014. Wherever you are, take care and be safe. Bye-bye.